If everybody could take their seats, we'd appreciate it, please. We can get started. My name is Mary Osborne, and I am one of the co-chairs for voter service for the League of Women Voters. And tonight, in conjunction with the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce, we are hosting a candidates forum. I want to welcome all of you to Lakewood City Hall, and I want to say a couple things about why we're here, which I think everybody has knows. But as we saw today, if anybody saw any of the hearings, one thing we know about democracy is that it can be messy. And it's one of the great things about it also. Everybody gets a chance to have their say, and the best way to do that is in the voting booth. I also want to thank the candidates who are running. I realize, and I think most people really sort of gloss over this, but there's some sacrifice that goes into being a political candidate. There's some privacy that you don't have anymore because all eyes are on you. You have responsibilities that are sometimes feel overwhelming to your constituents and to the people with whom you are serving. But I want to thank them all for being here and also for running and for being part of this. At this point, I would like to introduce you to Maria Shin. She is with the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce, and she is going to be moderating tonight. She is the founding attorney of the Shin Law Firm LLC. Maria specializes in estate planning, probate administration, adoptions, and non-traditional family law throughout the state of Ohio. She is a frequent lecturer on LGBT issues, legal protections for seniors, and estate planning basics. Maria currently serves as the chairwoman of the board of directors of the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce. She is also a board member of the Lakewood Foundation and Lakewood Senior Citizens Incorporated, and a past board member of Lakewood Alive and Adoption Network Cleveland. Please join me in welcoming Maria Shin.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you everyone for attending tonight's Candidates Forum. The ground rules are laid out in your programs, but I would like to highlight a few of them for you and also add an additional one that is not in your program. If everyone can please make sure to silence your phones and your iWatches as a courtesy to everyone in attendance, I would greatly appreciate it. We will be taking questions from the audience, but the questions must be written on the note cards provided, and there are ushers that have the note cards. You must sign the question. The questioner's name will not be read aloud by me. Questions may be directed to a specific candidate, but they may be answered by all the candidates. I will read questions aloud for everyone's benefit. Questions are screened by our group of screeners here. They are a bipartisan volunteer committee of League and Chamber members to assure appropriateness. Duplicate or related questions may be combined. My decision is final in distribution of questions. We will have time limits for the candidates. Their opening statements are limited to 2 minutes. Their answers to questions are limited to 1 minute. And their closing statements will be limited to 2 minutes. And we do have a timer with Mr. Ryan over there. And so there'll be a green light, and then when your time is coming to a close, it'll turn yellow. And then when you are finished, it will turn red, and I will be forced to interrupt you if you are not finished with your answer. In the spirit of fairness and impartiality, all candidates will be addressed as Mr. or Ms. as appropriate. If currently serving as a public official, a candidate will not be referred to as such during the forum. Photography, audio, and/or video recording on personal or professional devices during the event is strictly prohibited. The forum will be video recorded. It's actually being recorded right as I speak, and will be made available after the event. So those are the ground rules, and now I would like to introduce Mr. Terry Vincent, Chairman of the Chamber's Legislative and Governmental Affairs Task Force, who will do a review of the ballot issues. Terry?
Thank you. In addition to candidates, there are 4 local liquor options, Sunday sale issues on Ward 4 ballots in precincts C, E, and G. These are considered particular location options because they apply to individual businesses at fixed locations in the city. CVS, Aldi's, Diner Bar, and 5 o'clock Lounge. Particular location liquor options are required for liquor permit holders already holding a business at a particular location to sell whatever they're allowed to sell throughout the week to be able to sell on Sunday. Beer, wine, mixed beverages, and/or intoxicating liquor between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. and midnight. Voters living within each precinct must specifically approve Sunday sales in their precinct, and an election is thus necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. And now we would like to welcome our, oh, excuse me. And now we would like to welcome any judicial candidates that are running for a judge. Please come up to the dais, please. And because there are so many tonight, we will allow opening statements and one question per candidate and then closing statements. Please note that judicial candidates cannot give their opinions as to court decisions, and they cannot discuss how they would rule on a specific legal case. And candidates, please, when you take your seat, please activate the microphone in front of you by pushing the button until it turns red. That means that the mic is live.
Seems to be. Yep. Hello.
Okay, looks like we have 5 judicial candidates. Let's see. Do we have Ms. Lorraine Coyne here?
Negative.
No. Mr. Brian Darling?
That's me.
Great. Ms. Emily Hagan? No. Mr. Thomas O'Malley? No. Ms. Denise Reaney?
Here.
Ms. Deborah Turner? Yes. And Ms. Lori Dyke?
I'm Lori Ann Dyke, yes.
Oh, my apologies. And Mr. James Satula? Okay. Ms. Lori Ann Dyke and Mr. James Satula are not on the program, but we welcome them tonight. And Ms. Deborah Turner is listed on the addendum to the program. All right, well, we'll start at the very far end with Ms. Deborah Turner. If you could please give a 2-minute opening statement. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Deborah Turner. I currently serve as Assistant Law Director and Prosecutor for the City of Bedford Heights, a position that I've had for 11 years. I've been a practicing attorney for 19 years. I've had a criminal defense office where I've also practiced in family law and probate law. I've been a Cuyahoga County judicial officer as a magistrate in Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court, as well as Bedford Municipal Court. I've also been a diversion magistrate for the last 12 years, and I currently still serve in that position for the City of Bedford Heights. I'm sorry, I've got bronchitis. So I am, excuse me.
Can we pause for her and let someone else?
I'm sorry.
Come back?
One moment, please. I'm a
I would say
lifelong
nice things
Democrat.
about her.
I'm sorry. I'm a lifelong Democrat. I'm born and raised in Cuyahoga County, lived on the east side, and I'm prepared to serve in the capacity as judge for the Court and Common Pleas, serve the residents of this county. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Darling.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Darling. I'm running for a judge of the Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court for an open seat vacated by Carolyn Friedland's retirement. Before I get to my professional story, a little bit about my personal side. I'm married. My wife and I live in Westlake, and we have 2 children. They go to St. Raphael School in Bay Village. I've been a practicing attorney for 14 years, and for the last 7, I've owned my own practice, Darling Duffy, in North Olmsted. I handle all the trial matters for the firm, which has given me upfront experience both with courtroom procedure and due process. My father served our country in the United States Marine Corps, and as a result, my childhood address changed often. And I went to undergraduate school at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And then upon graduating, I moved back home to Cleveland with my wife to start our family and attended law school at Case Western. Prior to law school, I was a management consultant for a consulting firm called KPMG, Pete Marwick. And on the personal side, I enjoy CrossFit, I play golf, and I enjoy walking my dog Maximus along the streets of Westlake. And I encourage anyone to review the judgeforyourself.com scores. I did very well, which is a peer review by lawyers of judge candidates. And I also was fortunate enough to receive the endorsement from the plain dealer. So again, Brian Darling, running for Common Pleas Court here in Cuyahoga County. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll hear from Ms. Lori Ann Dyke.
Hello, my name is Lori Ann Dyke. I'm a candidate for judge for Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. I have over 20 years of legal experience. I'm admitted to the bar in Ohio and Washington, D.C. I have served as a Cuyahoga County prosecutor, prosecuting cases on behalf of the state of Ohio. I have served as a Cuyahoga County public defender, where I represented clients who are indigent. I enjoyed being a public defender and serving people one-on-one and representing them in court. I then moved on to become a judicial staff attorney. I work at Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court, the very court for which I am running. I have over 13 years of experience working at the court for which I am running. I work on complex civil litigation. Civil litigation makes up about 70% of the court docket. A lot of people don't realize this because they only see criminal cases in the newspapers and on TV, but the majority of the docket is civil. I've do research and writing of memoranda. I advise a judge on how to rule on in hearings and on motions. I've been doing this for over 13 and a half years. I have extensive knowledge of law in both civil and criminal. I also wanted to emphasize that I have judicial experience. I served as a magistrate with the Juvenile Diversion Program for over 15 years. It's an important program because it addresses the needs of teens, mostly teens, children who are initiated into the court system on first-time offenses, usually misdemeanor offenses, low-level felony drug offenses, and it's a program that helps them to make reparations in society and to change their way of life and to stay out of the system. I have a master's degree. I have a bachelor's degree, first of all, a master's degree, and a Juris Doctorate degree.
Thank you, Ms. Dyke.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from Mr. Satola.
Yes, my name is Jim Satola. It will be on the ballot as James W. Satola, and I too am running for the Court of Common Pleas for the seat currently filled by Kathleen Ann Satula. It is a seat, I think it is designated full term commencing January 7th, 2019. Before going to law school, actually, my background was in medicine. I have a degree in zoology from Ohio State University, which I got in 1984, because my thought then was, frankly, to be an eye surgeon, and decided not to go to medical school. But I did, my first job was actually as a medical research assistant at the Cleveland Veterans Medical Hospital facility on University Circle, doing research on the drug that people that have organ transplants take for non-rejection. While that was, some things are good about that job, I really did not particularly enjoy it. Decided to go really to what was my true calling, because I've been someone that's been a history and fact person ever since I was 1 year old, and decided to go to law school. So I went to Case Western Reserve School of Law, where I was on the law review for both my second and third year. In my third year, I was published. Actually, I was published twice, because the first time I was published was a pen and ink drawing that I drew of a professor at Yale University, and that portrait, I believe, is hanging in the Yale Law School library now. After law school, I was a law clerk to a federal judge here in Cleveland, United States District Judge John M. Manos, who I believe lived in Lakewood for some portion of time. After the 2 years for a clerkship, I was with Squire Sanders and Dempsey, a firm now called Squire Patton Boggs, where I did civil litigation, both state and federal, in cases all around the country and even all around the world.
Oh, thank you, Mr.
China
Satola.
and England.
Ms. Reedy.
Good evening. I'm Judge Denise Reedy. I am in the juvenile court building, which is on 93rd and Quincy. A couple things about myself. I went to law school when I was 40, specifically to practice juvenile law. After graduating, I started a law firm, and it was out here in Lakewood, right on Madison Avenue, with Edward Graham. And I took the bench in 2012, so I've been on the bench for 5 years, 8 months, and 27 days now. And what I want you to know is juvenile court is the most important court there is. It's where we can actually make a difference in the lives of the children before they go on to the general division or the municipal court. We try really hard to get the youth into services, or whether it's the family with the opioid crisis. So juvenile court does private custody, so if you're not married, you come to juvenile court, child support, traffic, so that 16-year-old that's buzzing around your city, abuse, neglect, dependency, so if parents are neglecting their children, not sending them to school, or there's any abuse or drug use in the house, and as well as delinquencies. So there's 5 really many aspects to juvenile court, and it's really important that we get services fast, make the youth accountable. Lakewood has a great diversion program, and the diversion program is intended to keep the youth in the community and make them accountable within your city limits. You know, Lakewood High School has a very diverse group of youth. Some are from, the wealthier neighborhoods, and others are from the less. And one of the biggest challenges we have in juvenile court, quite frankly, is poverty. That's one of the aspects that we fight every day. So what I want you to understand is I love juvenile court. I went to Baldwin Wallace College, and then I went to Cleveland Marshall. I've been a Cuyahoga County resident, but most important, remember, juvenile court is truly the most important court there is, and I'm Judge Denise Reedy. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have a question for all the judicial candidates. We'll start with Mr. Darling first. What do you see as the biggest challenge in front of the courts today?
The biggest challenge in front of the courts, in my experience, I'm a criminal defense attorney, would be the treatment of the participants that come before the court. As a defense attorney, I think it's imperative to treat everyone with compassion, with dignity and respect, regardless of why they are appearing before the bench. And, that experience in court is an anxiety-filled experience for citizens, regardless of what brings them there. They're unsure of where to go, they're unsure of what to say, the language is different. And if I'm fortunate enough to be elected a judge, I focus on the treatment of the people that come before me. And again, without regard to why they're there, I treat them with compassion and dignity and respect, so that when they leave the court, they have a feeling that, hey, I was treated fairly, my voice was heard, regardless of the outcome. Big challenge.
Thank you. Ms. Dyke.
I would agree. I think one of the biggest challenges for the court is to treat those that come before the court with dignity and respect. That includes people from just the general population, and also even attorneys that come before the court. There's been a lot of criticism of the court for a lack of respect for the people that come before it. As a judicial staff attorney, I work a lot with pro ses, which means someone who cannot afford an attorney, who represents themselves or just chooses to represent themselves. And I work with them on a daily basis. And I believe that, they need their time before the court. They need that their voice is heard. And I did that also as a Cuyahoga County public defender representing people in criminal cases. And I think that they also need their day in court and to be respected.
Thank you. Mr. Satula.
I would echo my 2 previous colleagues in that the fear that people have going to court and sometimes believing that they are not treated with respect by the bench, that's something in my campaigning that I've certainly run up against time and time again with my particular judicial slot. But one of the other things, too, obviously, that we're facing, which is no surprise to anyone, is the opioid crisis that we have, and a lot of people who are being brought before the courts on what is a use problem and not a dealing problem in people that might effectively need treatment versus prison, and having that dealt with effectively and appropriately, and not just having people immediately go to jail. So that's something that certainly is on the horizon deeply, and now and probably into the future.
Thank you. Ms. Rainey.
This is going to take a little longer. We have got some amazing programs in juvenile court. We have the warrant recall program that Judge Floyd and I created so that if you're behind on your child support and your driver's license has been suspended, you can come to court, you can pay $50, you can get your driver's license reinstated and back on track to pay your support. Because if you can't drive to work in Cleveland, it's really difficult to get to work. The other program is I started the Safe Harbor docket, which are the youth that have been trafficked. And when I say trafficked, I mean sex trafficked. And we've had over 100 girls assessed and boys. We've had 3 boys and the rest have been girls. And they have to complete an assessment with rape crisis. We determine whether they're appropriate for the docket. We ensure that they have services in place. I'm also the teen drug court jurist, meaning that regardless if you come from Bay Village or the inner city, if you are doing marijuana or doing any kind of drugs, you come into my court. You have to be there once a week. There's 3 phases, and you have to complete all the programs, or we take your phone and your Xbox.
Thank you. Ms. Turner.
I concur with my colleagues with regards to the individuals who come before the court, and that means in every respect. When you talk about the attorneys, you talk about the individuals who may serve on a jury, anyone who's in the court, I believe that it's a matter of people and their perception with regards to justice. What constitutes justice? What gives individuals a perception that justice truly has been achieved? I believe one of the greatest assets that I have is that I spent 20 years as an educator, which makes me an excellent listener. And I believe with regards to that, that will, if elected by the residents of this county, will help me to ensure that individuals are heard and individuals leave feeling that they've received just that, justice.
Thank you. And now we have time for closing statements, but if you would please incorporate one of the audience members' questions into your answer. Why do you want this position? And we'll start with Ms. Dyke.
Thank you for having me here today. The reason why I'm seeking this position is because I have the legal experience of working at the court for which I'm running. I've been there for over 13 and a half years. I know how the Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court works. I have that experience. I do writing, research of law. I speak with pro se's, attorneys, all sorts of people. I have both criminal and civil law experience. I would make the best I'm the best candidate for this position for judge for Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court due to my experience in both civil and criminal law. And I would just like everyone to know I also have the judicial experience of working as a magistrate for over 15 years, where I held hearings of my own, where I listened to testimony by children, their parents, police officers, and I rendered dispositions that included community service and other things such as that. I'm admitted to both Ohio and Washington, D.C. bars, and I have many endorsements for this position. I am the best candidate for this job, and it's due to my experience and also my love for just working at Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court. It's a great court. It is serving the people of Cuyahoga County in a positive way, and I want to be a part of that, and I want to help serve Cuyahoga County and the people that come before me, no matter what their position is in life, no matter what their why they are coming before the court. I want to treat people with dignity and respect and justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Satola.
Okay, I have actually wanted to do this since the day I entered law school 30 years ago. When I went to law school, I always had an eye on wanting to learn the right answer, necessarily the winning answer. So I didn't go to law school to learn how to become an advocate as much as how to understand how the law works, what the law is, and how it controls the interactions of people. It's why in law school I took some of the harder classes that I thought would prepare me best for being a judge, a broad view. It's why, having done well in law school, I wanted to pursue a clerkship with a respected United States district judge who dealt with both civil and criminal every day and who was also a wonderful teacher in what it was to be a judge, knowing my interest, and why in my time with Squire, Sanders, and Dempsey, I relished the opportunity to take on a whole broad array of cases that gave me an exposure to all kinds of cases, both simple and complex, both civil and criminal to some degree, almost mostly civil, and state and federal. So for me to pursue this is really to pursue what I have always wanted to do. Sounds corny to say, but like I love what are true civics of how civilization works and how people work under the rule of law and how people have responsibilities under it and also rights under it. And to gain a better understanding and to help people administrate that is pretty much always what I've wanted to do. So in a corny sense, I'm kind of living my dream now of being able to pursue this.
Thank you. Ms. Reaney.
Thank you. Did I mention juvenile court is the most important court there is? We are just getting started. In the 6 years that I've been there, we have created some amazing programs. There is no other court that I would like to work in. When I was, graduated from law school, I started doing guardian ad litem work, and I started domestic relations work because it's all family law. And we have implemented so many really good programs, and it's about rehabilitation for the community because every single youth is going to come back to your community. We want to bring them back a better person with better skills, because one of the things that we have been banging about is vocational. These youth don't have the opportunity to get a job. So if we wanted I want a vocational person in our courtroom or in our courthouse so that when they come home from residential treatment or even when they're on probation, they need to have some skills to actually earn an income. I also started a program where I can't make a youth go to church, but I can certainly make them sit down with a pastor in their area and put them on a mentoring program. So I make them sit with the pastor, say why they have to be there, and then see if anyone from their group their men's group will mentor them. And they have to call every single day because parenting and mentoring is a daily proposition, because when you connect with someone, and I tell them, I don't care if you tell them what a cute girl you met that day, you need to connect with somebody every single day. The problem we have, or the challenge we have in Cuyahoga County is how do you choose? How do you choose who to vote for? And judge for yourself is probably one of the better methods, but also Google us. But I was fortunate enough to rate excellent all the way across the board. I put them out there, so thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Ms. Turner.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to be before you. With regards to why I'm running, striving to make a difference. When I was 12 years old, there was a tragedy that occurred in my family that brought us into the criminal justice system. And I decided at that time that this is what I wanted to do, make a difference in the lives of individuals. Unfortunately, I was not able to pursue my law career as I had planned. I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school, let alone obtain a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a law degree. Worked my way through undergraduate school at Cleveland State by working as a maid, UPS stacking trucks, and also as a sales clerk. Worked my way through law school, raising 4 children, and teaching full-time at Cleveland Heights High, and attending law school at night and surviving on 3.5 hours of sleep. I say all of that because it says something about your character. I've advocated all my life for individuals with disabilities, as our son with Down syndrome, or my sister who was schizophrenic with regards to mental health issues, and we raised her daughter because she could not. Or my sister-in-law who was bipolar, and we raised her daughter because she could not. Or my brother-in-law who came back from Vietnam with PTSD. All of the issues that we have in our community in some form or fashion, I've had to deal with those. I believe it's not only your professional experience. I can cross the T's, I can dot the I's. I have the education. But life experience is also so important, because when people come before the court, they have gone through some stuff. And you need to understand that you can see stuff because you know stuff. And I am here and I'm ready. All of these things I say because I am ready, willing, and able to serve the residents of this county, and I'm just looking for an opportunity to add something, some value, I believe, that would bring to the bench. I believe it's the breadth of my experience that distinguishes me from my opponent, and I believe that I am the right choice at this time.
Mr. Darling.
Thank you. Thank you for Lakewood Chapter, the League of Women Voters, and in conjunction with the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce for having us here tonight. It's a great forum, and I wish more organizations would do this, because we don't have a lot of platform from which to tell our stories. But that's kind of the reason I am running, is because as a criminal defense attorney, I have a great deal of compassion for people's plight in their life, just as Ms. Turner discussed. And that compassion comes from not only just being a criminal defense attorney, but from personally. My father passed away a few years ago from suffering unchecked addiction. And that kind of triggered an idea in my mind that, you know, maybe increasing the platform from which I was practicing, and instead of a private practitioner, a judge is in such a great position to engage and inform and impact citizens' lives. You know, citizens who are really going through a tremendous, whether it's criminal or civil, you know, nobody wants to go to court, right? It's just not a generally positive experience. If you're ending up in court, something's gone on in your life. And the treatment of those people, it's very powerful if done well. Very powerful for a judge to come down. What I'm planning on doing, if I'm fortunate enough to be a judge, is to meet all the parties that come before me. I mean, it's just a simple handshake or a knuckle punch. I mean, just introducing yourself, engaging, bringing down those walls. And I just think, as a judge, if you think about the environment we're in right now politically, it's so divisive. You know, what team are you on? What do you stand for? A judge, ethically, we are obligated to stay neutral. We don't take sides. And I think that's such a beautiful position to be in, to bring, really bring a community together. And maybe I'm an idealist, but I'm not going to change. And I'm really fortunate to be involved in this campaign. Thanks for this forum. And remember, Darling for Judge. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And now we'd like to thank all 5 judicial candidates for coming tonight. And we will call up the next 2 candidates for Ohio House of Representatives, District 13, Mr. Jay Carson and Mr. Michael Skindle.
So you never know what some of the others you have with people.
It was a great experience. I was a swing driver.
All right, we will now start with 2-minute opening statements. Mr. Carson.
Thank you, and thank you to the League of Women Voters and the Chamber for sponsoring this event and for everything that you do throughout the year for this community. My name is Jay Carson. I am a 20-year Lakewood resident, married, father of 3 girls in the Lakewood City School System, 1 in the high school, 1 at Garfield, 1 at Grant. This is my first time running for office, but I've spent most of my professional life involved in public policy or government in one form or another. My first job was working in the Ohio House of Representatives, where I was a legislative aide to the Speaker Pro Tem and the Speaker. I helped draft legislation, met with constituents and interest group representatives, and I developed a real love for that kind of work and seeing what people can do when you cooperate, when you're both working together, and regardless of party or interest, but working together to solve problems. After the legislature, I was a clerk for the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, Federal Court. I was also a civil magistrate in Medina County. And again, those experiences gave me a lot to learn about our justice system, how that works, and how the legislature impacts that. I'm running because Lakewood is a truly special community. We have here a place where it's ethnically diverse, racially diverse, diverse by age, economically diverse. We are primarily founded on small businesses, and you know what? We're making it work. And to me, this is an example of what can work when people work together. I'm a Republican, but I've worked with folks across the other side of the aisle, and it's not about red or blue, it's about what we can do together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Skindle.
Thank you. I am Michael Skindo, and I am honored to be your voice in Columbus as your current state legislator in the Ohio General Assembly. As your legislator, I have been a strong advocate for good-paying jobs, for the right of individuals to bargain collectively, for fairness and quality, including equal pay for women, and to ensure that the LGBTQ community, there is no discrimination in housing and employment. I've also been a strong advocate for the environment, including clean air and water. I have been the primary sponsor of legislation establishing Ohio's Medicare for All, and I have been a strong advocate for open and transparent government. I have worked to try to establish a $15 minimum wage in Ohio, and I am a strong supporter of the right of women to make their own choices. I have been in the legislature somebody that has had the confidence of my colleagues by being selected as the top Democrat on the finance committees, both in the House and in the Senate. And in that role, I have advocated for strong funding for our community, for senior services and youth services, and making sure that those that do not have a voice in the Ohio General Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we will proceed with questions from the audience, and your answers are limited to 1 minute each. And this will be directed to each of you. As a House of Representative for District 13, what would you do with regard to school funding in Ohio? Mr. Skindle.
Thank you. I have been a strong advocate to increase the state's share of school funding and end the over-reliance on local property taxes. The Republican caucus has a belief that we should cut state funding to education and increase property taxes, and also transfer dollars to private charter schools. I am opposed to those efforts. I'm a strong supporter of a high-quality public education, and again, believe that we need to increase the more dollars from the state level.
Thank you. Mr. Carson.
Thank you. I think when I worked in Columbus, it was during the sort of DeRolf crisis when we re-examined how schools should be funded. And I will agree with Mr. Skindell that I think we're going to need to move away from the property tax-based system. Back then, there was a proposal to do things like earmarking portions of the income tax, so it moves directly to the schools and not through this convoluted formula. The other thing that I want to push is for places like Lakewood, inner ring suburbs, there used to be what was perennially introduced called the Attaboy Amendment, meaning if you were a school district that faced certain challenges but still got great results, your funding ought to be increased. That reflects a little bit on our school report card. There's the value-added component. But it really ought to go into, if you're a place like Lakewood that has high poverty, lots of kids, English as a second language, and we're doing good, we ought to be rewarded for the work we do. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to combine a couple questions from the audience. This will be directed to both of you. As you both are aware, the Lakewood Hospital issue was very divisive in Lakewood. Would you please state your position on that issue, and please explain what you're going to do to help this community and Lakewood come together from this point forward, representing District 13? Mr. Carson.
Thank you. I was very much in favor of the, well, it's hard to spell, but I was in favor of moving forward with eliminating the hospital. It was going away, and we needed to do something else. There's nothing that Lakewood could have done to preserve a hospital on that space. The market changed, healthcare changed, the incentives for people to invest in a hospital simply weren't there. And I'm proud of this community and what they did. They took the hard decisions, and again, I'm a Republican, but I'm going to give credit where credit's due to a lot of the Democratic leaders on Congress, or in City Council, who stood up and made a tough decision. And I think what we're going to get is a redevelopment of 5.5 acres in the midst of downtown Lakewood, which is going to be a fantastic benefit. As far as moving on, I'm ready to move on. I hope everyone else is too.
Thank you. Mr. Skindle.
Thank you. I was a strong opponent of closing Lakewood Hospital. Lakewood Hospital shut down primarily because our city officials refused to hold the Cleveland Clinic accountable in the operation of that hospital for a number of years. Our community had a hospital for over 100 years that served this community strongly, provided over 1,600 jobs in recent years, and it was an effort by certain community leaders behind closed doors without public input to shut down the hospital because they felt that the city should not be having the asset of a hospital. That was a citizens' hospital in our community. The decision of the mayor and council.
Thank you, Mr.
was
Skindle.
final.
Our next question has to do with the rainy day fund that the state currently holds. When local governments have had their income from the state funds cut, what is your position on using the rainy day fund for that? Mr. Skindle.
Thank you. I am opposed to the Republican effort to transfer more money into the rainy day fund. We have more than $2 billion now in the rainy day fund. Rather than using that to reduce the taxes for the very wealthy in the state, it is essential to return $1 billion back to local communities. The Republicans have cut local government funds just since 2010 by $1 billion. In addition, they have reduced funding for primary and secondary education, as well as funding to assist folks to have a higher education degree. My belief is that we should use those dollars in those areas.
Thank you. Mr. Carson.
I'm not sure that we need to expand the rainy day fund anymore, but I think some context is good to have. When we're talking about $2 billion in the rainy day fund, the state's annual budget is about $70 billion, and another 71 the next year. So when you're talking about having that reserve and those kind of numbers, consider if it was your own bank account, and if you had maybe that much of a cushion. So I think we need to preserve the cushion. Does it need to grow? No, I don't think so. I think we're getting close to a good level. That said, I do think and would fight vigorously for restoration of local government funds. In 2010, the state was experiencing a budget crisis and had to take some steps, and that fell on the back of local governments. And I think that's troubling. I think now is the time where we can move forward with revisiting how local government funds are distributed, maybe going back to the old system, which was, again, more a straight cut off the top of certain state revenues.
Thank you. The next question is, as my state representative, how would you advocate for the Lakewood community? Mr. Carson.
I think a big thing is I think Lakewood's story needs to be told. And I don't know that people here, and especially, again, as a Republican, and I've know a lot of Republicans, and simply there aren't that many Republicans who were elected from Lakewood. I don't know that those are the folks who are in leadership. and, you know, this is I can tell you the straight politics, likely probably will remain in leadership. They don't hear the success stories about the small businesses here that are growing. They don't hear, again, how we're working together as a community to do different things, like create this 5.5 acre new investment in the city. So I would like to be that representative, that person who can tell Lakewood's story to say, this is all the assets we have. These are the people who are doing such a great job. Again, they ought to be recognized for what they do in the state budgeting process.
Thank you. Mr. Skindle.
I have been one of the largest and most vocal cheerleaders of our community, Lakewood, in Columbus, in the Ohio General Assembly. I have routinely gotten up on the floor of the House or the Senate and have spoken about the wonderful assets of our community and the wonderful assets of our lake. Because of that, for example, I have been put on a special small group of legislator working group to deal with the water quality issues of Lake Erie. It's because I have advocated about our relationship, our community's relationship to the lake. I have talked about our wonderful Beck Center, and working with State Representative Nikki Antonio, we were able to secure $400,000 of funding for the Beck Center. And I will continue to be a strong advocate for this wonderful community.
Thank you. And this will be our final question before closing statements. What is your position on abortion? Mr. Skindle.
I am a strong supporter of a woman's right to make her own choices on reproduction.
Thank you. Mr. Carson.
I am pro-life, but I'm also a constitutionalist. And what that means is I respect the system of laws that we have in our country. The Supreme Court, in various decisions, has recognized a woman's right to have an abortion. That is the law of the land, and I accept that as the law of the land. That said, I would fight to help promote adoption, help promote services to pregnant mothers, and promote services that would make the need for abortion less frequent.
Thank you. And now you will have 2 minutes for closing statement. And I believe I started with Mr. Carson, didn't I, with opening? So we'll start with Mr. Skindle with closing. Thank you.
Thank you. In closing, I want to thank the Lakewood Chamber of Commerce and the Lakewood chapter of the Cleveland League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum tonight for the judicial candidates, the State House candidates. It's really a forum that is valuable to the citizens. I am Michael Skindle. It's been an honor for me to be your voice in the Ohio General Assembly and working on behalf of the issues of our community. The unfortunate part is the leadership in the General Assembly does not share the values of Lakewood, does not share the right of workers to bargain collectively, does not support an increase of the minimum wage to $15 an hour, does not support a high-quality public education. I have been a strong advocate for the values of Lakewood, for the values of women to make their own choices, to ensure that we have proper family planning programs through Planned Parenthood and support of that funding. I have voted against dozens of laws that have restricted women's rights and have pushed constitutional issues in this state. I have been one of the strongest advocates of our greatest asset, Lake Erie. I was one of the key legislators to ensure that the Great Lakes Compact was adopted by the state of Ohio. That's the compact that regulates water withdrawals out of the Great Lakes. I am currently serving on a water quality working group for our lake to deal with the issues of phosphorus pollution in our lake causing the deadly alga blooms. I continue and am proud to serve you and will continue to be your voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carson and Mr. Skindle. We appreciate your participation.
Hang on.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, you're right. I forgot Mr. Carson. My apologies, 2 minutes.
Thank you. First, I think that, you know, there's a philosophical difference, and I want to make clear, I think it's a philosophical difference, not a personal difference between Mr. Skindell and I, and that comes to regulating business. I see so much of the success of this community in its small business community, in the creating these niche places, and because, again, that's the backbone. We don't have a big industry here. And my concern is the more you regulate businesses, and I understand you want to have everyone paid a high wage and everyone do well, but I think in reality and experience, I don't think it works out that way. I think what you have happened is fewer businesses hiring fewer people and businesses closing, and that's not good for anyone. So my key focus is keeping the economic community vibrant. And that means to me less regulation from Columbus and letting them expand their businesses as they see fit. Part of that has to do also with just the state tax burden. Let them keep more money, let them hire more people. On other issues, again, my goal is to tell the story of Lakewood to those who may not hear it and may not have heard it well. This is a community that has been truly great because of its cooperation, and I think there's been so much partisanship and that has increased in Columbus since the days that I worked there. I'd like to see that more camaraderie, more reaching across the aisle to solve problems like we've done in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Thank you, Mr. Skindell, for participating. We appreciate it. And now we'd like to call the candidates for State Senate, District 23. We have Miss Nikki Antonio, and we did invite Mr. Steve Flores, but he did not respond to our invitation. Thank you, Ms. Antonio, for coming this evening, and we would like to give you 2 minutes for an opening statement.
Sure. Well, good evening. My name is Nikki Antonio. I currently serve as the state representative for House District 13, which is Lakewood and parts of Cleveland, and I've been doing that for the past 8 years. Prior to that, I was a consultant with nonprofit organizations. I'm a former special ed teacher, and I served on city council in Lakewood. And the things I learned from working with young people have served me well in the legislature. The first one is that you have to have a sense of humor. You have to like people because you come in contact with a lot of different people. And you also need never show fear. And so that's served me well as I've reached across the aisle and worked with my colleagues because we serve in the minority. I'm a Democrat in a majority Republican legislature. And so what it's made me do is be creative and also work with the folks that we can find agreements on. And as a result, I've been able to pass legislation. We've worked on getting amendments into bills to make them better, getting bad things out of bills sometimes to, again, make them a little less bad when all is said and done. And I feel very honored to have been able to serve this community for the past 8 years. The seat is open in the Senate, and so I'm looking forward. I am the Democratic nominee, having won my primary, and I'm looking forward to continuing to serve the people of Lakewood and Cleveland and also the rest of the district, which goes all the way down to Middleburg Heights and Parma.
Thank you. And now we're going to take some questions. I'll give you some questions from the audience.
Sure.
Explain your plans for encouraging economic development in District 23.
Sure. So when I was on city council, one of the things that I'm most proud of was, and it took quite a few years, to get sidewalk dining passed. And I was the lead person, city council person working on that. And, you know, what I learned from that was all of the different ways that we had to sometimes start over again, sometimes start from scratch. In the legislature, I have introduced a bill for LGBT equality and providing civil rights protections every General Assembly, so the FAST 4 times. The reason why I'm bringing that into a question about economic development is because we see this as economic development. Right now, the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, the Ohio Manufacturing Association, the Ohio CPAs, our very own Lakewood Chamber and chambers around the state are supporting this legislation to advance business throughout the state.
Thank you. And I would like to make this a two-part question, and the first part...
Does that mean I get extra minutes?
Well, the first part, I'll do it in two questions. The first part is, please explain to our audience and to those watching on the video, what is issue 1? And after you answer that, then you can answer the second question.
What is issue 1? I'm still trying to figure out what issue 1 is, real honestly, along with a whole lot of other people. At first blush, what it looks like is an attempt to really keep people out of jail for some minor offenses that have to do with drugs, get them into treatment, and also be able to take some of the money that's now going to incarcerate them and actually move to paying for some of those treatment opportunities. That's what I understand it to be at face value.
And is it a constitutional amendment?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And so the second part of the question...
Oh, I thought that was the second part.
No, that was still part of your 1 minute. I just wanted to clarify that. And what is your position on issue 1?
You know, I am still, I'll be real honest with you, I'm still trying to figure that out. I know that we need to do a better job of making treatment opportunities available for people. We have never seen the kind of opioid epidemic that we have right now in this state. We have people dying every day around the state from the opioid crisis. I have worked the whole 8 years that I've been in the legislature with my colleagues across the aisle to make some policy changes that have really helped in many ways, but we're still faced with the crisis. So I think that this issue has good intentions. I'm very concerned about amending the Constitution, and so at this point in time, I'm still looking at it and trying to figure out what is the best way forward. I don't know if it's issue 1.
Thank you. What are you planning to do to help return civility to our political discourse?
Well, I work every day when I'm in the legislature to try to, again, I talked about reaching across the aisle, to find folks that we can find that kernel of agreement on and then move forward. And so I've pretty much done that the entire time I've been there. I also belong to a group that is actually working on civility with legislators both in the state of Ohio and across the country. And actually, because I participated in one of those first programs, one of my colleagues across the aisle, Dorothy Polanda, and I then ended up working on a bill and passing legislation together. And it came out of those initial talks of civility where we got to know each other as human beings first. And I think if we can do that, it's not personal, it's about good policy.
Thank you.
We can have civility.
Thank you. And now we would like to give you 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Okay. Well, as I said in my opening statement, it's been an honor to serve. I started, it's wonderful to be in City Hall, where I started my service as a city council person, and I'm very excited about the possibility of continuing my service in the legislature by moving to the Senate. It means a lot more responsibility, a bigger constituency. But one of the things I've assured all of the people in the different parts of the Senate district is that all that means for me is a bigger challenge and the opportunity to serve a larger group of people. And I'm very much looking forward to working on those issues to make sure that people have good jobs, that we have excellence in education for all of our kids, that people feel safe in their community, they feel heard, and at the end of the day, all we all want is to be able to live our best lives and feel good about our communities, and I'm looking forward to working with the people in the entire district in order to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Antonio, for participating. And then, oh, I'm sorry.
I have 30 seconds for my applause.
And now, to be fair, we have a last-minute candidate here. We'd like for him to come up and introduce himself. And I apologize, I don't even know his name because I just learned of it. And you're a candidate for District 9?
Congressional candidate for the 9th Congressional District.
Okay, great. Well, if you could introduce yourself and give a 2-minute opening statement.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, it's certainly an honor to be here. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here. My name is Steve Krause. I'm running for Congress in the 9th Congressional District. And I was invited tonight. So I think some wires got crossed a little bit, but I did get an invitation. I did respond, and I'm here. So the 9th Congressional District, it runs from Toledo to Cleveland, and it covers the southern shore of Lake Erie. It's affectionately known as the snake on the lake. And they gerrymandered this district back in 2012 to run Marcy Kaptur, who is the current congresswoman out of the 9th District in Toledo, against then Dennis Kucinich, who is the congressman over here in the 10th District. So that's the district I'm running for. A little bit about me. I hail from Sandusky, Ohio, Cedar Point. Anybody ever been to Cedar Point? Okay, yeah, roller coaster capital of the world. Anyways, I grew up there. I was originally born in Bowling Green, grew up in Sandusky, Ohio, product of public schools. My father was a public school teacher, joined the Air Force when I was 18 years old. Spent 11 years active duty Air Force, then another 7 years as a contractor. I was in Special Forces. All while I was doing that, I was married and raising my children, and I was going to school part-time. It took me 12 years to get my 4-year college degree, my engineering degree, going, night school and stuff, but I finally got it. I believe in perseverance. I was in the first Gulf War, so I've been under fire. I know what it's like to be shot at. It's not fun. And I've served this country proudly. I left all that line of work back in 1995. I've done a variety of other things, including working for coal-fired power plants as a field engineer, and now I'm here running for Congress in the 9th Congressional District. My name's Steve Krause. Please vote for me in November.
Thank you. And I would like to apologize on behalf of the Chamber and the League of Women Voters if our wires did get crossed, but we certainly appreciate you being here. And would you mind taking a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. I will pose a few questions that were posed to Ms. Antonio.
Sure.
That's okay. What are you planning to do, if elected, to help return civility to our political discourse?
Well, and I got 1 minute for that?
1 minute.
Okay. Well, I was in the former Ohio House as a state rep. And she was exactly right what she said earlier. You find that nugget of truth or nugget of something that you can agree upon and you build on that. The problem with civility in the either in Columbus or in Washington, D.C. is that what you see on this side of the aisle is all this hostility. But what was really going on in the back, and our President Trump calls it the swamp, but you can call it the establishment, the deep state, or whatever, it's the party of power. And what they do is they make decisions back there long before anything comes out on the session floor to be voted upon. The decisions are already made in caucus and stuff. So I'm going to help not only work across the aisle, but to help expose some of that, what I believe is less than, you can call it corruption, but truthful negotiating behind the curtains.
Thank you. And this is a new question that hasn't been posed. But what have you done, or what will you do to promote and protect the rights of LGBTQ citizens in your congressional district?
Well, I have support from a lot of different gay friends of mine, and as far as enhancing their position, they're a constituent like anybody else, so I listen to their concerns. I mean, I serve the representatives, I serve my constituents in my entire district, whether it's Cleveland or whether it's Toledo, and my office is going to be open to all of them. So I'm not going to treat them any differently. I'm going to treat them with dignity and respect, and whatever their issues and concerns on, I'm going to hear it, and if it's a valid concern, I'm going to move on it.
Thank you. And this will be the final question before your closing statement. Explain your plans for encouraging economic development.
Well, that's a good one. I'm going to help President Trump with the tax cut too. I believe that the 9th Congressional District has been under depression for almost the last 40 years. The tax cuts that the Republicans instituted have actually breathed life back into the 9th Congressional District. We see the union benches empty. We actually see Lorraine Steele firing back up for the first time. Those are real jobs. And after the last 40 years, when I grew up, we had good jobs here, but they've all hemorrhaged away. I actually am proposing a true middle-class tax cut where anybody that works, makes less than $85,000 a year, after the first 30 hours in the work week, will pay no more federal income tax for the rest of that week. It makes no sense that the more they make, the more the government takes. They should be able to keep that money at home for their family and their needs.
Thank you. And now you have 2 minutes for a closing statement.
Okay, great. Well, again, my name is Steve Krause. I'm running for Congress in the 9th Congressional District. And there was one thing, before I go all the way off, there was a question that was asked earlier about Issue 1. And I want to mention that Issue 1 is going to be a death sentence to our state. And here's why. Because outside money, Mark Zuckerberg paid over $14 million, and George Soros paid I don't know how many millions of dollars to get it on the ballot. They are changing our Ohio Constitution with outside sources, and the legislators down in Columbus, the General Assembly, is not going to be allowed to vote on it. And if they, whether it's good or bad is secondary, you've got outside groups trying to change our Constitution. We will become one of the most lenient drug states in the country if that passes. 19 grams of fentanyl, 19 grams, will now be a misdemeanor. 19 grams of fentanyl can kill 10,000 people. Do we want that to be a misdemeanor? Now, back to my close. I'm running for Congress in the 9th Congressional District. I believe that my opponent's been there 35, 36 years, which is long enough. Part of the problem is we don't have term limits, and these people go and build fiefdoms and power to themselves. Like I said, I'm an engineer. I'm a former military member, veteran. I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I want to serve you and defend you and go up to Washington, D.C. and help pass true tax cuts that will bring more jobs, because when we have more jobs, we have more prosperity. When we have more prosperity, we have less crime. We have better communities. So it's jobs, jobs, jobs. Remember in November, vote Krause for the House. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Krause. I would like to thank all the candidates tonight for their participation. Thank you also to the League of Women Voters and the Lakewood Chamber Legislative and Governmental Affairs Task Force for hosting this program. Thank you to all of our volunteers who served as timers, screeners, and ushers. Thank you to the City of Lakewood for the use of the auditorium and the video recording. And of course, thank you for everyone who attended and who is watching this video. And that reminds me to remind you that tonight's forum was recorded and will be available for viewing in its entirety on Friday, September 28th, on the Lakewood Chamber's Facebook page and its YouTube channel. Go to www.lakewoodchamber.org. Please join us for the Chamber's next event on Friday, October 19th. We will be having a luncheon entitled Teaming Up for Success, Developing Downtown Lakewood. There will be more information on the Chamber's website. Thank you and have a good evening.